All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first Mentor Monday of September. My name is Christina Joy Whittaker. If you don't know me, I am a leadership strategist and a speaker, and I partner with women who are looking to take their career and life to the next level. So women who are typically in professional 9-to-5 sector who are looking to become thought leaders. I also partner with organizations who are looking to really engage their diverse talent. Since being in this particular field, I've worked with organizations from the NBA, from Lockheed Martin, to McDonald's, and I'm looking forward to taking all of that knowledge that I've worked with. You might have seen me on stages at your corporation or just in your email box, but I'm excited to take all that I've learned and everything that I've experienced in working with clients to today's discussion to help you through some of the things that you might be dealing with in your day-to-day life. The reason why I created Mentor Monday was to create this safe space for people to ask questions. A lot of times, especially for people who are just now trying to figure out what it is they want to do for their next level step, whether that be getting promoted within their organization or whether that mean eventually venturing out into paid thought leadership and speaking or consultancy, however it may look. A lot of times there's some shame in asking these questions, or you're not exactly sure where to start or how to gain that clarity. So we created this community for ambitious professionals so that you could have that space. And so you can get that clarity in a supportive environment with like-minded people who are also on the same journey. So I'm excited to meet all of you today and to answer your questions. Once again, if you are trickling in late, if you did not get a chance to submit your question via the form, or if you submitted it kind of last minute, please copy and paste your question that you did ask into the chat, the Q&A for this particular webinar, or you can put it in the chat and I'll see it there and I'll be sure to answer it live. But today we have some great questions and there's a good variety in there. So I'm looking forward to our discussion, but also if you have additional questions of your own, I will answer them live. So let's get started. The first question comes from Valerie. And Valerie says, while I have 30 years of experience, it's just now occurring to me that I want to pursue a path as a thought leader. Since I've just begun, I don't, I'm sorry, let me read this. Okay, I see. Since I've just begun, I don't want to take too much on too soon. Where should I begin? Valerie, I think this is a great question, and it's something that's definitely not uncommon. A lot of times, some career paths, especially if you're still in corporate or if you're still in a traditional role, a lot of times we aren't privy to paths outside of that hierarchy. We don't necessarily know what it means to work or be self-employed in the context outside of your organization. Now, it's not like you haven't seen entrepreneurs succeed. It's not like we haven't heard the stories, but there's a little bit of a disconnect. And I think a lot of it is by training. A lot of it is by design, that once you pick one path, that's kind of the path that you need to stick on. Like if you're the corporate professional, you need to stay corporate. If you chose the entrepreneurial route, then you need to stay entrepreneurial. And I would say in years prior to maybe the last few, there was not a lot of overlap in between. You didn't see a lot of people who were fully employed who also had side businesses. You didn't see a lot of entrepreneurs who ever desired to go back to their corporate roles. I do think right now in the changing environment that there's a lot more synergy in terms of what it looks like to define your career path forward. So that could involve you continuing on in a corporate space and then adding on speaking and paid thought leadership as an add-on. That could include you switching all the way over to doing it full time. Now, I don't want to necessarily say what path is right or wrong. I think it's intrinsically related to where you are in life, and in your circumstance. So only you can answer that question. But I will say, I think there's a lot more fluidity than there has been in the past in terms of just thinking about what that next step could be like. But something in your question I do want to pull out directly, just in case anyone else is on this fence. And that basically relates to, I think you said you had just now started thinking about this particular path, and so you don't want to take on too much too soon. I want to get to what's underlying with that question. And the reason why I want to pull out that particular part of it is because I don't want you to feel as if the length of time for your desire should determine the boldness of your action. The reason why I say that is just because you found out about something, just because this is the first time you're hearing about it, just because it just pricked your interest in, I don't know, recent years, recent months, recent weeks, maybe even recent days. Just because it has not been a long time or a dream that you've always had doesn't mean it lacks credibility, doesn't mean it lacks validity. And it also doesn't excuse you from taking action that would lead you to a point of understanding, that would lead you to a point of at least curiosity to find out what it is that's interesting about it. And the reason why I say it this in that particular way is because I was very much in the same boat where people don't always believe me, but I was in a six-figure role. And while I didn't necessarily like my role, I very much enjoyed stability. I liked my paycheck every 2 weeks. I called myself the queen of the 401k. I liked my retirement packages. Like, I was very much okay with just clocking in the next couple of years and just saying, like, you know what, this is life. There was some inner discourse going on inside of me, feeling like I knew I could do more. I knew I could build a legacy. I knew I could be more and give more. However, I just didn't see the path to do that. So because it was not in my purview right away, I didn't necessarily entertain it. I would always dismiss it or discount it as something else, or always say, well, maybe when I have this amount in the bank, then I'll try it. Or maybe if I invent something great, like, I can make the leap. But that's not what it looks like. It starts really as an inner knowing. It starts as a little nudge. It starts as a pricking curiosity that should prompt you to action, however little it may be. That could be you researching people in that field. That could be you just doing industry research about what it's about. That could be you having conversations like this, asking more questions about it. But I don't want you to feel as if just because it's new, just because the interest is new to you, doesn't mean it didn't belong there. And it doesn't mean that it wasn't ordained to be there at this particular time. So I would just like to empower you and really challenge you to scratch that itch of curiosity and continue asking yourself, what do you find appealing about this particular path? Are you looking to share your story? Are you feeling like you need to expand your expertise? Do you feel like you're able to have the visibility and the impact that you have right now in your current role? Are you looking for additional income? Do you want to be an emblem of success? Whatever it is, there's nothing wrong with what's motivating you at the moment, but it is your responsibility to make sure that you nurture it and take the steps needed in order to align yourself so that you can fully walk in to deciding and figuring out what that path looks like for you. So I love the fact that you have 30 years of experience, and I really commend you for even asking the question, because sometimes people get very far down a path and they don't want to deviate. They don't want to even admit to themselves that their desires have changed, that their goals have shifted. Because what I've realized a lot of times is when you make a shift of any sort, it's always going to inconvenience someone. And it will not always come with applause. Just because you've decided, I want to look at this new career path, just because you've decided to take these particular action steps, that does not mean that your community around you is necessarily always going to be understanding or supportive. And that's why you really need to find within yourself, what is it that's drawing you? What is it that's really pulling you towards this direction? And really pay attention to it. Don't dismiss it. Don't see it as something that's fleeting. Give the proper weight and the credibility to it, and go follow through in terms of just investigating, researching, attending conferences. I will say in my own life, this is such a long answer, but I hope this is helpful. I will say in my own life, when I got into speaking and coaching, I didn't know it was an industry at all. I didn't know it existed. I had seen speakers, I had seen coaches, but I didn't know anything about the industry at all. And it wasn't until I saw it, or no, it's a long story. But anyway, I ended up signing up for a conference spot with this woman named Marshawn Evans Daniels. And I learned, she's wonderful, by the way, but I learned about the whole industry. And when I was learning about it, that's when I realized the spark, like, this is where I want to be. This is really what I want to do. And now I can't take credit for making a big leap. I didn't necessarily say, like, I'm quitting my job and I'm starting this tomorrow. That's not what I did. Like I said, I was very risk averse. I didn't necessarily dream of entrepreneurship. So I said, I'll work a plan until I make enough money in the bank, then I'll switch over, or at least I'll start investigating it. But as life would have it, I ended up getting laid off. And instead of going back to a corporate role, I really felt like deeply inclined, almost divinely inclined, to continue down this path of learning about speaking and coaching and to start building in real time. And that's what has gotten me here. That's what's gotten me blue chip clients like the McDonald's, like the Targets, like the Lockheed Martins. That's what's allowed me to get to where I am today, because I leaned into that curiosity as opposed to just choosing the comfort of what I knew. And so, very long-winded way of saying thank you for asking the question, but I really want to challenge you to give the proper weight and credibility to your feelings. Like, understand that just because it's new doesn't mean it's wrong. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm going to end on that. That was a good one. All right. Next we have Jill. And Jill, let's see. Jill is saying, help. I've been in business for about 2 years now, and I'm also a speaker and a consultant. Yay. If I'm honest, I haven't been able to gain much traction. It seems like others around me are experiencing success, but I haven't cracked the code yet. Right now, I've been freelancing, but it feels like I'm getting underpaid for my time. All right, she adds a little bit more context. She says that she is a career coach and a leadership coach who works with executives. Okay, great to know. Jill, thanks for that question. I think it's a super honest question that a lot of us are afraid to say or ashamed to say, because we always feel like we must be wildly successful, or we see all of these examples of success in the entrepreneurial space. And if our story does not align to what we see, it almost feels like something is wrong with you in an instant. So if I may, I would love to just separate this, and I could totally be projecting. This is something I've dealt with myself, but separate your business from your identity. Just because you're struggling or doing things in your business that may not be converting at the moment does not mean that you are having some moral failing or that your identity is challenged in any way. You are who you are. You have the expertise that you have the values that you have, and that is not dependent on whether or someone buys a service from you. Now, in terms of just the practicality of it looks like there's a cash flow problem. It looks like you're having trouble with, I don't know the exact context, but it looks like you have not been able to gain traction in terms of getting the profits that you are looking for. Something that I can kind of think of some general things because of just the little bit of context that you offered. In terms of career coaching, especially if you're freelancing, I know there is a vast market for career coaches. And if you are freelancing for a larger organization, a lot of times what happens is that you're kind of trading time for money. So essentially what they do is they'll reach out to you, they'll offer you, an hourly rate, or they'll say, if you coach X amount of clients, we'll give you X amount of dollars. And I do understand how sometimes that can make you feel underpaid or undervalued, because probably in your own service line, you would either structure the pricing different, or you would be able to use a lot more collateral than being kind of linked to another person's organization. Here's what I will say about that. I think I don't think necessarily it's a wrong thing to freelance. I quite honestly, I think you get a lot of experience in working with other organizations. And if that is the path that you find yourself on, I don't think that is necessarily wrong. However, it does look like you want to shift over. And so if you are looking to really evolve in the way that you are able to create income, then one of the things I would really challenge you to look at is your suite of packages. Like, what are you actually offering? Are you offering packages at a price that's going to allow you to achieve the profits that you want to achieve? So for instance, if you are a career coach who is trading time for money, and maybe you're paying, I don't know, like $25 per session, $50 per session, will that ever get you to your monetary goals? And if so, how many people do you have to coach to get to that particular point? Are you overextending yourself? Is that even feasible? Can you even fill your books at that particular price point? And so without me knowing your structure, without me knowing your services, what I will say is, however you have it structured, look at the numbers. Be sure to take a hard look at how are you pricing yourself? Are you allowing yourself enough leeway time? Are you accounting for expenses? Are you accounting for business development? Are you accounting for hiring contractors? Are you accounting for the time to develop and onboard new clients? Are you accounting for offboarding? Are you accounting for all of the administrative tasks that take place behind the scenes in business that really can be a time suck and a money suck? And so you asked a very complex question, though it seems very simplistic. And without knowing all of your numbers, I'm not going to overstep and say, oh, you should do this, you should do that. But I would really say, look at your data, look at your numbers, whatever reporting system you may have, whether that be QuickBooks, like Dubsado or Stripe, like whatever you use to process money, whatever you use to process your packages, look at the flow. Is something selling? Is something not selling? Is there a particular clientele who resonates most with your message that you're missing? Is there a problem that you have not defined that you could define in terms of how you structure your business? And so really look at your data, look at your numbers, and look at who you are serving. I forgot the quote, but there's a quote that says, like, any pain in your business, I think this is from the same conference I went to, any pain in your business is a result of a missing system. And so a lot of times there's a brokenness in your system, whether that be your pricing system, whether that be your messaging system, whether that be your business development system. There's some lever that needs to be pulled that's not being pulled at this moment. So what I will say is, I don't want you to get discouraged. I don't want you to feel as if whatever you're offering is not valuable. It's probably just a practical issue. Like, it's probably just something that's on paper that you can look at. And I see you're adding a little bit more context in your Q&A. Okay, it says that you want to work with, or it says, I'm sorry, you said that you want to work with executives because you came from an executive sphere, which completely makes sense. So I would say, if you are doing, career coaching, that's one thing. Now, the second you put the title executive on it, that's a different price point, right? And the reason why it's a different price point is because, for instance, let's say you're partnering with an organization to do executive development from a career coaching standpoint. They need those people to be at the top tier of their game. And because of that, they need those people to be at their top of their game because they lead so many others. So when they fall, everyone else falls around them, which means that there's a higher stake to making sure that this particular population is equipped. You need to price yourself according to the urgency and the priority of that particular need. So you can't allow across the board pricing for what you might charge an entry-level employee transcend to something that's like an executive level, and you're working with a company. Mainly because that's devaluing your own self. That's devaluing the expanse and the impact of the coaching that you will be providing at that particular caliber, at that particular level. The second you teach an executive something, they're going to empower other employees to do it. So it's going to have a reverberating effect throughout the whole organization or wherever they're working. So you need to price for that. That's a benefit that you're offering. Now, if you're saying, I use the example of you working with executives in an organizational context. I know a lot of times executives also work, or they'll hire a career coach one-on-one because they are planning their own next move. Something I use this myself, so I'm going to gift it to you. Something, especially if you're looking to go into either group or one-on-one coaching for executives, what they value more than anything is discretion. And so if you are able to craft a solution, a package that streamlines the process and allows them to also discreetly make whatever decisions they need to make, you're going to be doing well. I'll leave it there. I hope that's helpful. Thank you so much, Jill, for that question. Now we are on to Marion. And before we jump into Marion, if you do have questions, if you weren't able to submit them on the form ahead of time, you can use the Q&A feature on this particular webinar, and I'll be sure to answer your questions live. But Marion, you ask, I've always wanted to develop a community-based program, but it seems like there are so many out there doing the exact same thing. If I were really going to make this transition, how can I find my niche or an underserved area? Or an underserved area where I can make a significant impact. Marion, I think this is a great question. And I'm gonna answer your question, but I'm also gonna just broaden the space that we're talking about as well, because I know you asked specifically for community-based programs, so I'm going to get to that. But also, I just think this is a question a lot of people ask in general. It's like when you're going to start an initiative, or maybe you're currently in an initiative and you're just looking around you and it seems like so many people offer the exact same thing. And you feel like you are in a saturated market and you're just one in a million as opposed to one of one. Marion, I will say for something like this, positioning is what's going to be key. And I'm going to go through just my kind of thoughts on how to effectively leverage positioning so that you can stand out from the crowd as opposed to feeling like you're swallowed up. But more than anything, you have to be very, incredibly clear on what differentiates you and what you have to offer from other people, whether that be a nuance in your personal delivery of services, whether that be something that is only found in regard to the way you structure your programs, the way you do a particular method, the way you are able to either shorten a process or streamline a process or simplify it or produce a particular impact. You have to be a steward on about your results. You have to understand the actual impact that you're making so that you can very clearly communicate your difference in the market. You won't always know that right away, to be honest. And it's not, you didn't say that you just started, so I'm not going to treat you as if you just started. But if anyone is just starting, sometimes that takes trial and error and time for you to really learn how to make that, how to differentiate or how to talk about that. One of the best pieces of advice that I ever got about this was really in real time, start having conversations with people, start talking about your service, start seeing what they repeat back to you, and then using those particular words. When you start using their words, you actually probably get a little bit clearer because they're telling you a version of what they just understood you saying. And so if I tell someone, hey, I'm a leadership strategist who does XYZ, and they repeat to me, oh, you help executives do blah, blah, blah. What I would do is take those words and then use it with somebody else and almost over time, you could see people getting a little bit clear, and understanding like, oh, you don't feel like you're fumbling around anymore. But I think it's a good question. What I will say in terms of just some steps that I jotted down, I want you to be sure, especially for your community program, I want you to be sure that you are identifying gaps, okay? When I say gaps, I mean gaps or areas of need. The trap that comes with community programs or educational programs in general is that it's the benefit and the trap. They are heart-centered. They are for the good of the community. They're for the good of the people in the community. And a lot of times people feel like because they are doing a public good, that pockets will open or doors will just open. And that's simply not the case. And so what I want you to do is be very diligent in understanding where the gaps in industry are. What about whatever you offer is not being done at the moment? Or what do you offer that is better than what's in the industry at the moment? And that needs to be amplified. So I want you to identify all of the pain areas that deal with the target population of your community program. So I don't know exactly what you mean by community program or who's involved in this. In my mind, I go to kids, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you work with kids. So if you want to add a little bit of additional context, go ahead. But I will say, I want you to be very clear on what are all the things that ail that particular population and be very clear about it. Be a scholar about it. And then that's when you can start leveraging positioning. Because you know a problem, problems create need. There's a demand to solve that particular problem. And that's where we can start inserting you in terms of figuring out, how do you stand out from the crowd? How do you not look like the other program that's down the street? How do you make sure that like this particular option that you're offering is going to be not only impactful, but profitable for you, so that you're not feeling like you are just in a swamp of people who offer the same thing. We were talking about community, but that goes for anyone. If you are in a dense industry where there's just a lot of voices, there's a lot of people, you have to figure out what is the problem that you uniquely solve. You don't have to be the only problem solved. You don't have to be the only person solving it. However, you need to be able to speak about it in a way that you're either doing it better, you've either innovated a method, you've either mastered a process, you've streamlined the whole problem so that you're a one-stop shop, whatever that is, to knock you out of the category of being one in a million is what you need to do. People ask me all, like, there's a lot of people with coaching programs. There's a lot of people who, you know, help ambitious women. Like this particular industry is fairly dense. And so people always, I won't say they always ask me. Sometimes they'll ask me like, oh, how are you similar to this person? Or how are you different from this person? And in my mind, I don't compete with anyone. I'm only in my particular lane. I am very clear about the people who come to me. I am very clear about the people who like the way I work. And so that's all I pay attention to. Those are the only people who I cater to, because I know that I'm called to those people. I'm not called to everyone. I'm not for everyone. My delivery style, a sensitive person would not be able to handle. Like, I'm just not that type of person. However, I know that about myself and I'm very clear about it. And so knowing from your program aspect how to identify those gaps are going to be key. I want you to also to have, to help you do that, I want you to have a lot of conversations. Go out into the market. Have conversations with community group leaders, have conversations with the check holders of your market. And when I say check holders, I mean the people who write the checks. So for instance, and I use this example because it's the quickest, you might have you might have a program for kids. Kids don't pay for themselves to enter the programs, right? Adults have to make that buying decision. So you need to talk to the adults. If you are working with the unhoused population or something, or, you know, if you're working with people who might have disabilities, people who are veteran status, people who are elderly in age, like whatever community focus that you have, whoever has the purchasing decision is who you need to be having conversations with and understanding what their particular needs are. That's going to help you in terms of figuring out how you can position yourself. And also, I want you to leverage referrals. So if you've already seen some traction, or if you've already done business with someone, or if you've already shown a proof of success of some point, at some point with people or with an organization, ask that particular organization who they would also refer. Because typically in regards to companies, in regards to work, in regards to clientele, birds of a feather typically do flock together. So if they found interest, if they found that you were a good fit for them, most likely they know others in their network who they feel like could be compatible as well. So I hope that's at least enough to get you started in terms of thinking about how to better position your community development program. If you do have, oh, I'm sorry, I missed your, hold on. Okay. You work with retirees and the elderly. Okay. So that means that you can be very targeted in who you have those conversations with. So anyone in those communities who makes decisions for those communities, that's who I would start having those conversations with. So you can so they can not only see you as the experts, but so also you can just do for your own learning, like what is going on, what's out there, what do you need to do to really position yourself in that way. So thanks, Marion, for that question. I saw a couple of other people trickle in. If you did not get a chance to ask a question on the form, you can still submit your question using the Q&A function, and I will get to it. Some people have been messaging me as well. I'll look at the messages too. All right. We are down to the last two. Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn says, you talk a lot about the upsides of this work. While I'm intrigued, what are the potential challenges and obstacles I might face on this journey? And how can I overcome them? Gwendolyn, that's a good question. How do I answer this? There's definitely, I think, to any decision, there's definitely high moments and there's definitely low moments. There's definitely things that are incredibly beneficial, and there are things that, you could probably do without. I will say, more than anything, the problems going down this particular path come down to mindset. Because more than anything, more than the money, more than the results, your mind will take you out of business before anything else. And so I will say one of the biggest obstacles, especially if you're not used to being incredibly disciplined with your thinking, with your patterns, is really going to be your mindset. And so I would say one of the main things that I see people run into more than anything is not being decisive about this particular decision. So waffling in and out. Now, there's a difference between doing multiple things at one time. I want to differentiate, because some of you are corporate professionals and you are actively building in thought leadership or speaking. That's different, right? You've made the decision to build in that arena. That's different. I'm talking about more so about the people who have like one toe in and take it out, one toe in and take it out. They're not really committed. They're not necessarily sure if they want to do it. It might be a confidence thing. It might be a time thing, whatever it is, you've made excuses for why you don't want to do it. I would say either get in or get out, because you waste a lot of time and you waste a lot of money just standing in between. And so being indecisive about the decision to actually take this on, is a huge obstacle, because one, you're going to not get the results that you want, and the compounding effects of not getting those results really start eating away at your own esteem. Sometimes it starts eating away at your identity. I always say, I feel like paid thought leadership, speaking, entrepreneurship in general is a huge revealer. And I mean that to say, it will reveal every little limiting belief you have about yourself. It's going to float to the top when you're doing something like this, because you face tons of rejection. You're trying something new, so you can't say that you're going to be a master at it. A lot of times, you know, you're working alone. It can be, I won't say a lot of times, but sometimes, especially when you start out, you might just be by yourself, and so it can be fairly lonely. So understanding that if you're not decisive that you want to do this, you're going to almost torture yourself on a wheel, in that wheel of indecision. So either get in or get out. If you want to stay in, what I will say is another obstacle is letting go of perfectionism. So I know this is a community of highly ambitious people. And so once again, I may be projecting, but I could probably assume that perfectionism might be something that you struggle with. Perfectionism is something I definitely have struggled with and still actively have to work through. And it is not easy. It is an absolute beast, to say that you're going to give more credit to progress than perfection. But I will say, in this particular journey, the movement forward is what you're looking for. It doesn't have to be perfect steps. It doesn't always have to be the quote unquote right steps, but you have to keep moving forward. And so letting go of perfectionism is definitely something that is a battle, and a challenge that you're going to have to learn. It's like relearning a version of yourself, relearning to give yourself grace, relearning who you are supposed to be in this particular moment. And that may look very different from who you have been. It may look very different in terms of you doing what you have done. And so just keeping that in mind. I think another obstacle that people run into is not clearly identifying a problem to solve. More than anything, that's when you feel like you're spinning at the wheels and you're just offering a bunch of things, or you're just saying a bunch of things, is if you don't know there's a problem that needs to be solved. For instance, in my business, I know that a lot of women in transition tend to come to me. They are in transit. They are either actively about to quit. I would say in the last 6 months, I've talked to no less than maybe 30 to 50 executive women. And I segment executives, I mean, as meaning like top of their industry. I would say 97% of them are about to quit. I didn't know this when I talked to them. It just happened. It just happens to be. I don't try to guess why anymore. It's just a fact. It just happens, right? And so I know that's the type of person who typically gravitates to me. I also know the person who gravitates to me might be a little bit fatigued with some of the other programs or, you know, things that they've seen before, and they just really need someone who's able to not just put them in a pool of people and see them like every once in a while, but someone who's actually going to take time and work with them and like break down a process and really kind of not battle with them, but like show them the way, but also walk them through the steps. And I know that's my teaching style. I don't try to do that. I wasn't necessarily trying to fit a need. That's just naturally how I am as a person. And I know the people who work with me really enjoy that particular aspect, because it's not like they're just in a huge group of people and they don't know how to connect. I make it very clear how you can connect when you work with me. And so, getting clear, I know that those particular groups also tend to have very similar problems. And so I'm very clear on the problems that I'm able to solve in those particular groups. So one of the main obstacles is not being clear about your problem, not being clear about your problem, as well as not being clear about how you plan to solve it through your lens. And so I hope that's helpful in terms of at least giving a very realistic, I think that was a great question, a very realistic perspective of how this road can be. You know, when I started in entrepreneurship, I tell most people, like, I had the plan, I had the idea, but I really knew nothing. And so the first 9 months, I made nothing. I didn't make a dime. I made nothing. And so what I've been able to build in terms of partnering with companies, in terms of, you know, doing larger scale projects, in terms of doing consulting projects, has been birthed and and map out of necessity. Like I had nothing. I had to build it. I had to figure out a method that was going to work. That's now the method I teach my clients in order to help collapse time. I will say it doesn't always happen overnight. Like it just doesn't. You hear these stories and you hear these like, you know, testimonies depending on what circle you're in. And, you know, they made the decision and the next day they got a huge whatever. I was waiting on my call. That didn't happen for me. I didn't get that call. I didn't get a huge deposit the next day. I didn't like, that's not what happened to me at all. I wish it would have been great. Maybe I don't wish, but it would have been nice. But that wasn't my testimony. That's not how it happened for me. I really did have to build. And so, and not to say that the people who have those stories didn't have to build, they just built a different way and they got to build from a different level. So I don't mean to put anything negative on that. I think that's actually amazing. But I use that for reference to say not everyone's story and not everyone's journey is going to be identical. So if you do face some challenges on this road, don't take it as a personal attack, like something is wrong with you, because everyone runs into something at some point. Even at the highest levels, they're running into different issues. The more you make, the more people you serve, you're just having a different set of problems. So everyone is going to have obstacles. What I will say is don't let that intimidate you from taking the first step. And so, Gwendolyn, I don't know if you're actively in business or not. I know you said like you're intrigued, so it doesn't sound like you've taken that first step. I would say if this is a step you're supposed to take, I can guarantee where you are will become increasingly uncomfortable until you decide to make that particular step. And so don't allow the forebodings of things being difficult to stop you. Because at the end of the day, you're resilient, you're smart, and you can figure it out. And people have done it. I always say, like, look at patterns of success. If somebody is already doing what you want to do, if somebody is already active in what you want to do, look at what they did. Don't reinvent the wheel. Look at what they did. Look at those examples of success. Don't hyper focus on, you know, an obstacle that may stop you. I would always say, more than anything, always choosing courage over comfort. That's going to get you way further than, you know, having to overanalyze like the pros and the cons. I get it. I'm a pros and cons girl. I'm not even like saying don't do that, because I do that naturally. I do that in my sleep. However, there's a step that still needs to be taken after you've looked at the cost and understanding that it's still worth it. Even if you are unclear, even if you're still trying to figure it out, it's still worth it to take that step. If this is something that you're supposed to be doing. If not, this doesn't apply to you. But if it is something that you're supposed to be doing, I would say I would really, really encourage you to take that step. Something else that I do just want to highlight is, just because you feel called to speak or, you know, work with corporations or be in this arena doesn't always mean that it needs to be your primary business model from the beginning. Like, especially, it's just a lot of pressure, especially if you're like, oh, I'm going to quit tomorrow and build. I'm not saying you can't do it. Like, if you can do it, like I say, go for it. I have a plan to help you get there. I got it. However, you don't necessarily always need to put that undue pressure on yourself if that's not what you're called to do at this moment. And so if that's not you, then work your plan from where you're at. I talked to 3 women last week who are all high level professionals in their organizations. And we literally crafted out plans of what does it look like for you to add this on to your current structure? What does it look like to embed this in your life so you're able to get that leeway? They didn't feel inclined to quit at the moment. And quite frankly, you don't have to. It's not necessarily a responsibility for you to, unless, you know, something else is prompting you to. But I will say, this was a long answer. Sorry. Sometimes I get down a tangent, but what I will say, Gwendolyn, is don't let the obstacles deter you. You know, if this is still the step that you're supposed to take, do it scared, do it anyway. There's never necessarily there's never necessarily a right time. I was not quote unquote ready. I was not quote unquote thinking that that was the right time. But whenever you take the step, that is the right time for you. So Gwendolyn, I hope that's helpful. And now we are down to our last question from Cindy. If there's any last minute questions, you can go ahead and put it in the chat and I'll get to it. But without further ado, I'm sorry, the chat or the Q&A, and I'll get to it. But without further ado, Cindy, I know I want to share my story, but that's about it. I've had a lot of twists and turns in life, going from being a single mother to becoming an executive. I'm a little afraid because while I want to tell my story, I don't want to say too much, and I'm not sure who will listen. Right now, the golden handcuffs are tight on my wrist. What does storytelling? Oh, how does my story convey to broader audiences? Cindy, I think this is a great question, and I don't know your story per se, but I'm going to explain just my thoughts around sharing your story. I'm going to explain just my thoughts around that whole process. So you mentioned the golden handcuffs, and just to clarify for anyone who has not heard that term or you're unfamiliar with that particular term, the golden handcuffs is basically the term that's referred to high paying jobs. So they're giving you the salary that you want. They're giving you the perks that you want. They're giving you the benefits that you want. Basically making it so if you leave, you're going to feel that because you are very comfortable where you're at, and they want to keep you comfortable. It's not always necessarily a bad thing. If your company is paying you well and taking care of you, it's fine. However, they do start to feel like handcuffs when you know it's time to go, or if you know it's time for you to do something else. That's when they feel like handcuffs. That's when it feels restricting, because even if you have all of these great things that will keep you here, and it's not just executives, it could be at any level. Like if you are getting the perks, the benefits, everything that you want, then it seems like there's a big case for you to stay versus trying something that's new or trying something that's unknown. So, Cindy, you talked about sharing your story, and I love the fact that you want to share your story. I think our story really is a catalyst and a driver that calls people to us. It allows people to relate to you in a way that perhaps they would not have related to someone else. So your story is definitely a calling card, and it can be leveraged very effectively. I'm going to quickly address something you said about you want to share your story, but not say too much. I am a very private person. I know a lot of speakers who are very private people. So there's a difference between spilling your guts on a stage and telling everybody your business versus using your story as a driver for a message. The reason why I say that is because there is an intentionality that you have to use when conveying your story and picking the pieces that are going to be relevant to the audience that you're talking about. So for instance, if I'm talking to an NBA team, I'm only going to use pieces of my story that's going to be relevant to getting them to a point of understanding for the message I'm delivering. They don't need to know what I ate on Monday. They don't need to know that a cousin pushed me off a bike at 6 years old, unless it was relevant. Like there's no need to necessarily share or have this be a public diary. What I want you to do is understand that whenever you're giving a platform, you have the responsibility to command it, or I'll say the opportunity to command it in a way that's going to be poignant and deliver the message that's going to impact the audience and move them forward. So I would encourage you, especially as you're looking to understand, like, how do you share your story? Understand the pieces that are that you're comfortable with sharing, but also that translate. And if they don't apply to your message, then don't use it. Don't include it. There's no need for you to reveal all. There's no need for you to show everything. What is needed is for you to be intentional about your words. What is needed is for you to care about who you're speaking about. And what is needed is for you to impart some sort of revelation on that particular group. That is what's needed. And so however closely your story correlates or not, then use the parts that you're comfortable with. Also, there are some speakers who don't use any parts of their story. I think people mistake the use of the mechanics of storytelling with telling your personal story. You can tell an anecdote, you can tell an inspirational tell, you can tell an example or an exemplar of a story that literally has nothing to do with you and all to do with your point. And so you don't have to, I don't want you to feel the weight like, oh man, I got to take this on. I got to share, my story. You really don't. You could go through a keynote and it be the most amazing keynote and you not share a personal tidbit at all. And so I think, to be honest, I think sometimes preachers and ministers are some of the best examples of how to use anecdotes or stories in a way that's going to be very image driven and visual and move an audience to a particular point of understanding. I think they are really great examples of how to use that mechanism, but don't feel as if you need to spill every private secret in your life. Now, if you are looking to use that as a platform, if you're looking to say like, hey, I beat the odds from, being a single mom to raising it to this particular position, that's wonderful. Then I say, go ahead, but just be intentional about the pieces of your story that you choose to tell, and just keep your audience in mind. What you want to do is be able to translate to them a solution to whatever their pain might be, or drive them forward to some sort of new idea that you're putting forward, wherever direction you're trying to move them. Understand that you need to be intentional about picking the words, picking the pieces that translates best for them. But I think that's a great example. And also at the end of the day, most people don't want to know all of the aspects of your story. Like, people love themselves. They don't always love to hear about other people. And so there's not an obligation. There's nobody holding anything to you to tell or divulge anything that you don't want to. And this goes for anyone, not just Cindy. This goes for anyone who wants to intertwine pieces of their story with their message. You can do it in whatever method that you want. Just understand what is going to be most effective for your audience. There are some audiences who may not want who may not respond to personal stories. There are some audiences who will line up around the corner to learn more about you. I mean, it really just varies. So I don't want you to put yourself in the box, especially when it seems like it's early on. Just understand that there's a lot of ways to share your story. There's also a lot of different ways. I see your tack on question. There's a lot of different ways that you can get into the industry of speaking and paid thought leadership. And it doesn't always just have to be speaking. You could be a paid facilitator. I was paid to moderate a panel discussion. You could, one of my clients actually packaged and sold a podcast series to a branch of banks. You could come in and just be like kind of a person on retainer. There's so many different ways for you to leverage thought leadership. There's so many different ways to you to leverage speaking. The thing is, most people have not investigated those ways. Most people have not learned how to do it in the corporate sector. That's where I know I shine. I know the different ways that you can really kind of transform yourself into something that's going to be resourceful and needed in the corporate sector. I like the corporate sector because they pay big checks, and I enjoy that. But I hope that was helpful, Cindy. And I hope that gives you a little bit of context. I love the fact that you want to share your story. And I think if you have that urge, then there's probably a need for people to hear it. But just understand that you can be just very intentional about what you choose to share, the way you choose to share it, keeping the listener in mind. What about whatever it is that you're sharing is going to get them to a point of understanding or get them to a point of healing. That's what you really want to hyper focus on. So, and I'll say another point, this is a tangent. Someone also always said, like, if you, like, the stage is not public therapy, right? So don't be working things out like in real time. Like, figure it out ahead of time and then be composed so you can be able to share the lessons learned from the message, because essentially that's what people want, is what did you get from it? What can I now take with me? But I think that's a great question. I think it's a great start for anyone who's really serious about going into paid corporate thought leadership. I am just a big advocate for this space. I know I toot this horn all the time. The reason why I think, I was thinking about this for my own self, for my own reflection, why I'm so not necessarily stuck on corporate, but very much am a banner flyer for doing business in corporate, is because there's so many ambitious professionals, especially ambitious women, who pour in so much time. You pour in so much energy. You pour in so much of your value and resources into these organizations, into these industries. And a lot of times it is lopsided in terms of the value you get versus the value that they get. And I just find this as a great equalizer when women are able to come in and command in an hour what they used to make in a month. I mean, that to me is what's amazing. That's, to me, is what's life-changing. And so as many women who take me up on the offer, I want to show you how to do that. And so I do that through these Mentor Monday sessions. I do that through my private coaching. I do that through my group coaching. So I hope that transcends. That's really the heart. Like, and there's so many people who feel, even though they're in corporate bodies, right, or like in larger organizations, you can be in company with people and still feel so alone and feel so isolated. And so, quite frankly, sometimes I wish I would have heard glimpses of some of these messages. I just never knew they existed. I didn't know there was an ecosystem for this. And so sometimes I wish, well, I don't wish, because I wouldn't trade what I went through for now, but like, think of the people that you can reach en masse, you know, who you could inspire, who you could show another way to, that they don't have to just kind of punch in, punch out, that there is an opportunity for them to investigate a world in which they could share their authentic selves and share their thoughts and share their natural gifts and abilities. So that's really why I'm passionate about this particular work. And I hope today's Mentor Monday was helpful. I know we're right at the hour mark. And so thank you all for your time. Thank you for your amazing questions. I didn't see any last ones in the Q&A. So I won't prolong this. I thank you all. I'm going to stop the recording. I do have one quick update that I'll give. Give me a second.